Story number 1. Narrowly avoided being sent to prison for 10 to 20 years for several drug crimes and instead paid minimum fines due to some quick thinking and taking a huge risk. When I was in high school and the few years after, my primary source of income was selling pot. One day I was just hanging out at home with the GF. We went to the Circle K a few houses down and got some beer. The clerk, who I knew pretty well at this point, asked if he knew where I could get a dub sack. I said sure and that I'd be back soon. I go home and forget about it. An hour or two later I'm like, oh shit, remember, weigh it out and go back. He had already given me the money, very important detail for later, so I waited until he had no customers. He came out and we went around the ice box, just smoking and chatting. I handed him the bag. Now, there was no one around. Empty lot except for this beat-up Volvo facing the record store next door. If I had been paying better attention, I may have noticed this Volvo had completely tinted windows, which seemed odd to do on a beat-up Volvo. Two men get out of the car and approach us. One tall skinny guy wearing 100% denim and another guy who looks like Dog the Bounty Hunter in a beige sweater. They approach us and ask how we're doing. Me and clerk look at each other like, you know these guys. Then all of a sudden, the flash badges and yell, EPD. You're under arrest, and cuff us, separate us, and search us. Beige dog goes through my texts, finds a couple dubious ones, a few crumpled up 20s, starts trying to get me to admit to doing a lot of business today, blah blah. Then they surprise me by walking me and my GF back to my porch, saying they've seen me come and go quite a bit and just want to make sure you don't have a pound of heroin in there, and they'll just charge me with a misdemeanor. Otherwise, it will be jail and a felony. So here we are, on my front porch, me saying there's no way I will let them in my house and to call my lawyer over and over. At one point, my roommate walks out, says hi, gets in his car and leaves. At this point, Dog explains that if I don't let him search the house, he's going to park a few squad cars on the lawn, extract everyone from the house and wait on a warrant, and they will charge everyone in the house with every little thing they find in any room. I now know this is not legal. Then, I was just scared. My roommate that had just left was a total nerd with a great job. Straight edge. Rarely drank and never smoked or anything at all. I was terrified of him losing his job. Unfortunately for me, I had just had an opportunity to get a quap of mushrooms at a steal of a deal. My area was super dried up on mushrooms at the time, so I asked around and basically had all my deals set before I got it. This timing was perfect, because just 30 feet away on the coffee table of my bedroom was 1/4 of a lb of mushrooms, neatly weighted out into ounces and January 8ths. Top that with all the pot in there, it wasn't looking pretty. So, I proposed that I let one of them in to search just my bedroom and be done with it. I knew once I let them in they could do whatever, but I was out of options. Beige dog agrees. Canadian Tuck stays with my GF, who looks terrified like, WTF are you doing, at me, and Dog the Sweater Hunter enters with me. I lead him upstairs, and walk right past my door, which thank God was closed, and into the straight edge guy's room. Dog completely turns it over. Takes out drawers. Turns the mattress over. The whole sherbang. As he does this, I quietly turn off the computer monitor with a background of my roommate and his GF glaring on it. Guy finds nothing, sticks with his agreement and walks me and my shit-eating grin back downstairs. My GF, probably assuming I'm going to prison for many years, is looking like she's about to die, but I'm just grinning. Guy still charged me with a felony. Then they leave. Long story short, paid a lot for a great attorney who was friends with the prosecutor. Since no money was seen to be exchanged, the charge was knocked down to deliverance of marijuana. The prosecutor recommended the minimum sentence. I paid an $121 fine, did 80 hours of community center at a local music venue, saw a ton of shows for free and retired from selling. Story number 2, the stepdad incident. Before I say anything, I was sentenced to 10 years in prison for aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. Now I'm doing better for myself and currently living with my dad while I try to settle in for a job that hires convicts, lol. Back in the year 2001, my mom and dad got a divorce due to my mom having an affair with my soon-to-be stepdad. Both of my parents were granted 50/50 custody of me and my two siblings. It wasn't until 5 months after the divorce that my mom and stepdad got married. After my stepdad moved in with us all, he would to his boss me around since I was the oldest. It was annoyed and I had the urge to beat his ass, but I didn't since I thought it was just a phase, but it turns out it wasn't. In 2004, on my 18th birthday, my dad got me a truck and a puppy for my birthday for me to pay with. I was so happy since my stepdad and mom didn't even bother getting me anything for my birthday. One day I was just casually driving around my truck until one of my siblings called saying that my stepdad quote unquote accidentally ran over my dog with his car. I panicked and drove home as fast I could. Then I took my puppy to the vet, and sadly he didn't make it. I was crying and pissed off too. I couldn't take it anymore, so I snuck into my dad's house and got a gun and went back to my house to confront my stepdad. At this point I was done with him. My mother was always on his side and I was fed up. So I went inside and confronted my stepdad. Then I forgot to get rounds for the gun, so I instead just pistol whipped him and just beat him until he was unconscious. My mother wasn't home, she was out elsewhere. The only reason why I got caught was because the neighbors heard screaming and yelling, called the cops. When the cops came and they say my stepdad unconscious and still breathing, but they saw the gun on my hand and they arrested me. During the process they asked me multiple questions. I answered them as honestly as I could. But in court my stepdad just told them a different story, which ruined my life. So I was charged with aggravated assault with deadly weapon and domestic violence. And got a 15-year sentence. Note that I was already 18, so I was sent to prison instead of a juvenile detention facility. While at the prison the only visits I got were from my dad and mom. Mom was pissed about it. Dad, on the other hand, felt sorry for me. He insisted that he'll go and handle business with my stepdad, but I told him no because I didn't want him to end up like me in prison. I made some good friends in prison. We would hang out during lunchtime and yard time too. The prison was located outside of the city. So basically the middle of nowhere. Yes, the drop the soap thing is a real thing too, lol. But anyway, 10 years go by and I was released from prison since I had good behavior. Now I'm 36, am still living with my father, trying to buy a place of my own, but currently having a hard time due to my criminal record. My mom and stepdad, on the other hand, got a divorce due to my mom being a drug addict. My siblings are all grown up and one of them is currently financially helping out. I currently have 2 dogs that are like my children to me, both are 2 years old. Now I forgot to tell you that I was like my siblings' role model. And when I said it turns out my youngest sibling decided to do the same thing I did back in 2004, but on one of her bullies at her school at the time, and parents pressed charges on her. She's currently serving a 15-year prison sentence with an eligibility of parole this upcoming new year in 2024. But her sentence does not end until 2026. Now I want you to answer this question. Was I good role model for my siblings? Story number 3. I, 32M, am divorcing my wife, 33F, after finding out that my son, 5M, is not mine. Well, a couple of weeks ago I found out that my wife cheated on me 6 years ago. The way I found out is that her sister told me after going to visit her to find out how the delivery of her first child was. She confessed to me that 6 years ago my wife told her that she slept drunk with her best friend. In her words, my wife was very sorry. At the time she told me I was with my son, and immediately after leaving her house I went to take a paternity test with him, fearing the worst. A week later I get the results and my fears came true. My son is not mine. For some reason, I began to see the boy differently, more as an acquaintance than a son. With proofs in hand I confronted my wife at night when the child was sleeping. She asked me who told me and I simply told her that it is none of her business, although obviously it will not take long to connect the dots that it was her sister. Well, that is not my problem now. Regardless of that, I asked her for a divorce, which is now in process. She was devastated. She swore to me more than once that nothing happened with anyone again, that she has been faithful to me in body and soul since then. I held back the urge to insult her to avoid complications during the divorce issue, not believing a word she said, mostly blaming the alcohol instead of taking the blame herself. After talking about it, she threatened me saying that she would demand full custody of the child. I was so annoyed at that moment that I told her, okay, I don't want anything to do with something that is not mine, that she keep the child and I'll keep the dogs. We have 2 dogs that we adopted as puppies and they are currently 8 years old each. After my words she tried to convince me to take care of the child with her, that I am his father. At that moment I exploded. I was so angry and I had held back so much the urge to scream that I just yelled her to go and take her kid with her. A week has passed since that and I am at home. It is in my name because it is a gift from my parents. She went to her parents' house with her kid. She has not called me since then. She left with everything and the half-asleep kid when I yelled at her, especially since it was the first time I really yelled at her. It sure affected her. I talked to my parents and my dad told me that I did the right thing and that I shouldn't be raising something that is not of my blood, and I agree with him. However, the pain is still there. My younger brother told me to write here to entertain myself. I am currently seeing a therapist 3 times a week, who told me that I have already taken the first step, which was to leave behind what causes me pain. It just hurts to know that my family no longer exists. Regarding why my sister-in-law told me everything, according to her, she felt guilty seeing me always happy with my son, knowing that he may not be mine, and that the fact that we went to visit her in a moment of weakness caused her to completely break down with guilt. I don't know how true that is. I just know that right now I feel tremendous hatred for my wife and a feeling between pain and resentment for the child, although it's just time to get ahead. I just hope the divorce goes smoothly. We have separate financiers and properties, and if she really asks for child support, I have proof that it's not mine. According to my lawyer, that's more than enough if she tries a legal process for that. My therapist also recommended that I not see him nor her, that regardless of the child's feelings, I should focus on my own first, that the child is no longer my problem, and the sooner I accept it, the better. Story number 4, my coworker who's also my friend fell down the stairs and died in front of me. 4 days ago I was walking with a coworker on a break just to stretch our legs. We work in an office setting, so like to get up every once in a while and get some fresh air. We walk in a half circle around the building. In the back there are stairs that we like to go down and then back up on our way back for exercise. It's 2 sets of 15 concrete steps. It was a beautiful sunny day with blue skies. Near the top of the stairs we were in mid-conversation while heading down, and all of a sudden I hear him go, "Oh God," and trip and fall somehow. He rolled down and landed at the bottom in a heap, face first in the concrete. I just stared for a few seconds because it was so sudden. I ran to the bottom while asking if he's okay, but he didn't move or respond. I got close and realized there was blood coming from his head and face, and his arms and legs were seized up and stiff when I tried to roll him over. I freaked out but managed to call 911 while also texting another coworker friend of mine to come outside the office because our friend fell. 911 told me to roll him over and do CPR while they came, which I did. The ambulance got there about 7 minutes after I called and took him to the hospital, but I'm 99% sure he was already dead when I was doing CPR. I feel really weird about it. Like sad, but also just strange. It's hard to put into words. It doesn't seem real. I will get flashes where I realize what happened and feel an intense tightness in my chest, and the severity of it hits me. I keep imagining him laying at the bottom of the stairs face down, and also his torn up face when I was giving him CPR when he was already dead. It's also just really sad because he was one of my best friends at work. I've barely slept since Tuesday, and was full of adrenaline for a full day after it happened. He was single with no kids or anything. Only has a brother and father who live in other states. I don't really know why I'm writing all this, but I just feel really strange and am wondering if anyone ever experienced something like this. Story number 5, my M26 girlfriend, F29, cheated on me in my face. My girlfriend and I have been in a relationship for 4 years and have been living together in a rented apartment for 2 years. Yesterday she and I went to a party. There we both drank alcohol and had fun. At the party there was a guy who from time to time approached a random woman and asked them, "Can you give me a kiss on the cheek?" So that at the last second the guy moved his face, causing his lips to collide with those of the girl he asked before. I warned my girlfriend about that guy, and she could even see it with her own eyes, and I told her to be careful if he approaches her and asks for the same thing, because there were also several girls who refused and he simply did not insist. A couple of hours later I was with my girlfriend and that guy comes up and asks my partner the same thing. She takes me aside to have a quick talk and tells me that nothing will happen, that if he tries she will move back herself so they don't kiss. I told her that I did not agree with this at all and that I felt very uncomfortable, and that I would not take responsibility if she ended up doing it. She ignored what I said and ended up accepting. I don't know why, but I wasn't surprised when she didn't back away like she said and ended up kissing him. She then looked at me and got uncomfortable, then the boy went the other way to continue with his fun. I wasn't mad at him, I was mad at her. I just turned around and went to our apartment. She followed me even though I didn't tell her to do so, saying that she didn't have time to react and that it wasn't her fault. Since we were in a public place I didn't want to make a scene. So I waited until we got home. Once at home I told her that yes, it was entirely her fault. She saw how the guy did that with other women and I even warned her that this could happen and she still did it. She said that the alcohol made her act reckless. I told her not to come out with her BS excuses, that she was fully aware of what happened and that this was pure infidelity to my face. At this moment she went to visit her sister because today is her birthday. I told her that I would not go and I told her explicitly that I want to reevaluate our relationship. If she is going to use alcohol as an excuse for her infidelities, then I can't trust her anymore. If she does that to my face, I don't want to imagine what she would do when she is with her friends. Before leaving, she begged me not to exaggerate, that I can't throw away 4 years for a non-consensual kiss. I told her that the moment she agreed to play that boy's game, she was already giving her consent to what could pass. She is already an adult and I expected her to act according to her age. The more time passes, the more I want to tell her to go to hell. The rent contract ends at the end of the year, but I was thinking of using a part of our savings to pay the rest and end it prematurely. I don't want to be with someone who can grab, kiss the first idiot I meet at a party and wait for me to accept it without problems. On the other hand, it makes me quite sad to have to leave the relationship, but forgiving a lack of respect of this magnitude is opening the door to more things like this happening in the future. My younger sister and my parents agree with me, but my older brother, who is the closest person to me in the family, thinks it can be solved. I really don't know what to do. Story number 6. My wife slept with my best friend and now wants to work things out. I, 36M, have been with my wife, 35F, for 17 years. We have 3 children together. I was always of the mindset that I wanted monogamy in life, one woman to come home to and that I'd be with for the long haul. I had women try to talk to me over the years, but I never pursued it because I was completely content in my marriage. My wife was my dream girl and I never wanted to hurt her. Over the years there was 2 occasions where I discovered she was being unfaithful in our marriage. One was an off and on again affair that lasted a few years with her married co-worker, and the other was a fling with an ex she dated in high school when she went to visit her family states away. I'm sure there will be people who say I am stupid, which looking back I can't even deny myself, but after a period of separation with both situations, I decided to forgive my wife, as I never wanted to raise my children in a broken home like I had been, and I really felt like we could make it through it. We were young whenever the situation with her coworker happened, so I chalked it up to being young and making dumb choices without thinking. For a while things were seemingly okay. I never fully trusted her, but I tried my best to push back my doubts because I knew if I decided to forgive her, then I had to do my best to move past it and have a clean slate. It's been 4 years since the second time she'd been unfaithful, and I felt like I made the right decision by letting her have that chance to show she still wanted to be in our marriage. She was a different person for years and we were happy and even had various things set in motion for the future of our family. However, 2 months ago my reality was once again shattered by yet another incident which in my mind was by far worse than the others. I ended up receiving a message from one of my best friend's wives. This friend knew my wife a little. He'd met her in passing, but it wasn't like we all hung out together or anything like that for me to even worry about them. We worked together, so there was sometimes my wife would bring him up multiple times while we were talking about work. She would bring me coffee to work and also one for him. I noticed when she did, she'd dress in more revealing clothing than she usually wore, but I never commented on it. She even convinced me that we should buy him a joint birthday present and take him out for drinks on his birthday. Just little things like that which were obviously weird, but like I said, I didn't think I had anything to worry about with either of them. To my knowledge, he had a good marriage with his wife. He never spoke badly about it, so I didn't think he'd have any interest either. Not to mention we'd actually been friends for a very long time and I trusted him. I'd make comments in a joking way to my wife about how she took too much of an interest in him, and she laughed it off, saying she just wanted to have another couple to be friends with. She never actually tried to plan anything as far as to hang out with him and his wife as a couple. I agreed they would be good to be friends with, so again I never thought too much into the overly friendliness of my wife with him. Turns out I was way wrong not to, because I was met with multiple screenshots implying they were engaged in a full-out affair. I wanted to get my proof situated before I ended up confronting my wife, because I didn't want her to have the opportunity to manipulate the situation or try to lie her way out of it. So I started to go through call logs, credit statements, etc. Because I didn't know how far this actually went past the social media screenshots I saw. When the truth came out, neither of them tried to lie to me about it. I found out they were sneaking off to hotels when she was supposed to be doing doubles at work and he was supposed to be off with family. And that my friend would leave work to go see her at her job basically every day for a month, and she'd meet up with him on his lunch breaks. They were even planning a weekend at a hotel for the next weekend before the truth came out. I obviously cut ties with my friend, and honestly I have no idea what to do about my situation with my wife. Their affair ended and my wife apologized profusely, saying she just got carried away. She said that she'd felt lacking in our marriage with both of us dedicating so much time to work/other things, and that my friend was there and a nice guy. She said she let herself envy the way he treated his wife and wished she could have had that with me, but was afraid to tell me I wasn't doing enough in our marriage. So in her words, she made a mistake and that she didn't know how to end it once it started. For now we are living in the same house because realistically neither of us have the means to leave right now as her family doesn't live here, plus the costs of renting and houses here are absurd, and on top of that we still have our children in our house who are all still in school. She is basically trying to do anything to keep me around, including telling me I can see women casually outside of our marriage as long as I come home to her. She would never hold it against me as cheating. I told her that's not much of a marriage and it's certainly not anything I ever set out to have, but she is hellbent on keeping our family together by any means. She's even brought up how we shouldn't let our kids live in a broken home because of our marital issues. I guess my wife is under the impression that nothing could make me want out of this marriage and that by offering things like that she thinks will fix our marriage. I guess in a way that is my fault for letting so much slide in the past. I do love her in some ways, but at this point I think the love is more just from the fact we have kids together and that I've been with her for nearly 2 decades rather than feelings of being in love. My self-confidence is low and my wife is out of my league, but still I don't think that's enough of a reason to stay. She claims she loves me and doesn't want to lose all we've built and are building toward, but to me I just can't see how that can be true when she was so okay with running around with one of my only friends. I can't trust her. To me her word is meaningless. I forgive her, then how long until she goes and does it again? I do think people can make mistakes and be forgiven because people are flawed, but this isn't just one slip-up. And truth be told, my faith in her is so low I don't even know if there's been more instances on top of the ones I actually know about. My mental state is essentially a puddle of mud right now. I'm sure there's probably someone reading this calling me a dumba ***, and I can't even argue that, but yeah, basically my life is a shit show and I don't know how to proceed. Edit. I'm not staying with my wife. I should have clarified that better. Me saying I don't know how to proceed is more talking about how to go about handling this with my children. I've never dealt with anything legal, so the stress of having to meet with lawyers and also not knowing how to go about our living situation. I have enough proof that my wife couldn't flip the switch and take everything from me, but as a guy that's always something you have to worry about. Thank you for your words, and some of you saying I'm a dumb ***, trust me I know, can't change that now unfortunately. Just have to keep moving forward. Story number 7, Retired FBI Confession. I used to work in a medical procedures unit in a hospital in the PNW. Patients would undergo endoscopic exams, which they were sedated for. We had an elderly gentleman patient this case, and while we waited for the doctor to arrive we engaged in friendly chit-chat, nothing out of the ordinary. When the doc came in, he immediately asked us if the patient told us his history. I started rattling off the medical reasons why he was having the procedure, and the doc cut me off saying, no, his past work history as an undercover FBI mob agent. Naturally my reaction was, oh no. That must have been interesting, dealing with those mob guys. The patient's response has haunted me to this day. His exact words: those guys weren't as bad as those mother effing politicians. He then went on to tell a story about how he was head of security for a congressional event in the 80s. He said another agent handed him the phone saying, "Congressman wants to speak with you." The conversation went as follows. "Congressman, will there be women there?" Agent: "Not sure what you mean. But yes, women are here." Congressman: "When I arrive I want one sent to my room. No older than 13. Right after he said that, the CRNA pushed the meds and he passed out. We all just stood there in silence while he underwent the procedure. What the F did he just tell us? Edit. Apparently people are getting hung up on the use of the term informant. So I removed it. For clarity, which I thought might have been deduced. This old man was not a mob informant, in the sense of being a snitch in the mob. He was a retired FBI agent who worked undercover with the mob at one point. In a completely separate point in time, he claimed to have been asked by a congressman for a 13-year-old girl. This man had no reason to lie. He didn't even bring it up, the surgeon did. Story number 8, I lost my V card to a 37-year-old woman, and now a 14-year-old girl has reached out to me claiming I'm her father. It has been a weird couple of days for me and I need to get this off my chest. This all started on Friday when I got a Facebook message from an old colleague telling me my daughter was trying to get in contact with me. I hadn't heard from this person in years, so I was skeptical at first, but I decided to hear them out. The girl in question has recently lost her mother to cancer, and the man who she thought was her father turned around and told her she wasn't his and kicked her out. She moved in with her uncle thankfully, but ever since she's been looking for a real dad. Anyways, around 15 years ago I was a naive young man barely in my 20s working in a supermarket. When I started I was buddied up with a 37-year-old woman who was drop-dead gorgeous. Like I said, I was rather naive, so obviously I instantly became infatuated with her easygoing and tactile demeanor, Sadly, only a month after I started that job, she handed in her notice, and that spurred me to go for it and ask her out on a date. She laughed and agreed, and so started the wildest 3 months of my life. I won't go into details, but we were intimate on a handful of occasions, and I even stupidly confessed my love to her, but it was then she told me she was moving away to be with her fiancé, which left me absolutely heartbroken. Later, a colleague would tell me that she was also seeing a guy who worked on the checkouts at the same time she was seeing me. Back to the present day, and I had all but forgot about it. I have 2 kids and a very pregnant wife to think about after all, so this has somewhat knocked me sideways. I feel for the kid having her whole world torn apart so abruptly, but the thing is, I don't think I'm her father. Though I was young and foolish, I always used protection, but there is a part of me that hopes I am, as I can provide the loving family that she is so desperately looking for. I haven't told my wife yet because she is 8 months pregnant with our 3rd child and has enough to worry about, but I have arranged a paternity test. Another thought that crossed my mind, that she is contacting me first because I am the better prospect, as I went on to bigger and better things while the other guy still works on the checkouts at the same store 15 years later, and from what I've been told has a bit of a problem with alcohol. I'm also angry at the men who raised her, playing dad all those years only to callously abandon her when she needed him the most. I'm also angry and sad that I might have missed out on so much of my potential daughter's childhood. The wife knows something's up, so I think I'm going to bite the bullet and tell her. I just had to get this off my chest. Edit. Update. Wow, I didn't expect this to blow up so much. I have an update on the situation, so I sat my wife down and told her everything this morning, like most of you have been suggesting. After giving me a severe tongue lashing for not telling her sooner, my wife said probably the most sensible thing I've heard, which is I should try and contact the girl's uncle to verify her story, and boy am I glad I did. You see, I had made one fatal assumption, which was that the stepfather was the same person as the fiancé. Turns out checkout guy found out about the baby and claimed she was his. The fiancé broke things off after finding out about her infidelity and decided to move abroad. Checkout guy got a paternity test when the girl was born, and he wasn't the father, but he only did it to try and get back together with her, which obviously failed miserably. The stepfather didn't come along until a year or 2 later after the girl was born. He's been having a hard time dealing with the death of his wife, and after a particularly bad argument decided the best thing was for the girl to go and stay with her uncle, who is an absolutely lovely guy and actually remembered me even though I had only met him briefly in the past. Anyway, she is happy and safe at her uncle's. It's close to her school and she gets on well with her cousins. The crazy thing is that they weren't actually looking for me, I just happened to have the same first name as the fiancé. The young lady jumped the gun in getting in contact with me, but they are 99% sure that the fiancé is her father. This is when my wife made another sensible suggestion. God, I love that woman so much, and asked for the girl's birthday so we can match up the dates, and they don't quite match up, but I'm still going through with the paternity test just in case. The thing is, now I have to put up with the odd rendition of Billie Jean from My Beloved, which is probably going to last a few weeks before it gets old. I should explain why I didn't immediately tell my wife about this. You see, I was just panicking about the whole situation, and though she is a caring and understanding woman, she can be rather ferocious. Needless to say, I try not to find myself on the sharp end of her tongue. Also, she is 8 months pregnant and it has been a difficult pregnancy for her, and I didn't want to add any extra stress, but as many of you have pointed out, it would have only been worse if I had not said anything. Story number 9, parents of a beaten-up student wants to get my license revoked after I saved their son. This happened literally last Monday. For context, I'm a teacher, and I teach senior students. I am advising a class of STEM students, and handles all STEM and senior high subjects. Monday class starts like every Monday class, flag ceremony, went to classes, etc. At recess, I noticed that some teachers are talking to some grade 8 students. Welp, I don't know the time that they're grade 8 students, it looked like they were up to no good, but I didn't bother to intervene, because we're professionals and trained to deal with those kind of stuff. After the classes, I was facilitating the cleaning of my classroom, and almost always goes home at almost 5 p.m. after most of the students and other teacher has gone off. I ride a motorcycle going to work. We own a car but rarely use it because it's impractical with the gas prices. My work is at least 9 kilometers or 6 miles away from home. As I was going home, noticed bunch of our student forming a circle, not sure of the term, but there are a bunch of them in an area, about 5 to 6 of them in a waiting shed, and seemed to be hitting something. It got my curiosity, stopped and turned back to see what they're up to. When I called them, they all ran away, panicked as they recognized me. I immediately saw a kid lying down the pavement and blood flowing. I rushed to the kid and checked if his breathing, put him to a recovery position, to his side, as I noticed his nose bleeding, a cut on his forehead, swollen left eye and other bruises. I opened the under-seat box from my motorcycle and got a cloth tied it with the rubber I had to his forehead. Called a emergency response. The kid woke up at this point and I told him to just lay down. Some bystanders noticed me as I yelled for help. I asked them if they knew the kid's parents and some of them recognized the kid and immediately ran to their house for his parents. After about 10 minutes an ambulance came, and as the ambulance came, I stood aside as they removed the cloth bandage I put on his forehead. They asked me some questions, and I told them the story. The parents arrived panicked, the mother was crying, and they went with the paramedics. I haven't had any update that day, went home, told my wife the story, and she kinda teased me because I saved someone today. That's her way of saying she's proud of me. I was trained as an emergency responder, and yes, I was proud of that. Today, I was attending a seminar when I got a call from my school head. The parents of the kid wanted to file a case against me because I didn't interfere earlier. I didn't do anything to avoid this conflict. As a teacher, I should know how to mitigate situations like this. I was negligent as a teacher. I did not prioritize the safety of their child. And they claim they contacted a lawyer, telling them that the school or me should be the one paying the hospital bills, because it was our fault this happened, or else they'll file a case. Turns out, the students I saw that some teachers are talking to, are the ones who beat up the kid. And the other teachers believe their stories that they were just talking that time. The kid's name is Alvin, not real name, and he was a shy kid, with problems with his left eye. He was getting bullied because of that, and now, the doctor said that he may never see with that eye again. It broke my heart. Tomorrow, I should be attending the second day of my seminar, but I will go talk to the parents, straighten things up. I understand that they're just run by their emotions. I know I didn't do anything wrong. I don't even know their kid up to that point and it happened outside the school parameter, so the school have no authority or obligations. I'm not pointing any blame to others. I just kinda feel guilty, knowing that what if I talked to the students earlier that Monday. I dunno, maybe I could have handled things better. Anyways, I just wanna share my story here. I know it's kinda boring, haha, but thanks for reading. I'll update if I can. Edit. Thanks for all your advices. Since yesterday, I've been making calls, my lawyer godparents, my friend lawyer, some local officials for some CCTV camera footage. I was friend with almost all officials within our school community because I helped a lot of students get scholarships and even pass on their college application. Some of them are their kids. They collected witnesses, and the community have been very supportive. The school board talked to me, and said that I didn't do anything wrong. Our school head said that if I didn't step in, Alvin may probably be gone. Even my lawyer said to not speak to the parents, and advised me to wait for the footage, and my lawyer friend will collect statements. Story number 10, my real-life example of, next time you need help, call a crackhead. Ye old 1998. I was in the L5P area of Atlanta behind the Variety Playhouse with some friends and my new boyfriend. We're all teenagers at the time. They smoke weed and I don't, so before we get out of the car, they all pass around a quickie joint, which I didn't smoke. About 2 minutes later, a cop is pounding on the driver's side window and forces everyone out of the car. Turns out, they'd been watching the whole time, and were laughingly disappointed that I hadn't smoked. They weren't interested in stopping a crime or anything, they just wanted to bust as many of us as possible. So everyone except me is in handcuffs on the ground when the wagon pulls up an hour later to cart all of them to jail. It's dark, the parking lot is now empty, and I realized these cops were planning on just leaving me there. I explained that I didn't have a license and begged them to take me. Cell phones weren't a thing at the time. They told me to call a cab. I explained that I lived over an hour away from Atlanta and didn't have that kind of cab fare. They told me to walk. I begged them, crying, to at least drop me off at the store on the corner, and they laughed, told me I wasn't their problem but I could call them back when I needed someone to scrape up what was left of me. L5P was super sketchy after dark back then. My boyfriend was crying, and had me grab the keys out of his pocket while the others were screaming directions home through the door of the wagon. And then I was alone. A literal crackhead prostitute lady found me and walked with me up to the store, where I tried to use their busted payphone. She hung out with me and chased off all the creeps who were soliciting me. We sat on the corner for a while until another cracked-out dude wandered up, asking when MARTA started up again. It's like 2 in the morning and MARTA doesn't run for a few more hours. When he realizes I have a car, he tells me he's staying at a place right next to I-85 and if I can drop him off, he can show me how to get home. He pumped gas for me, because I never had, and I drove with my door partially cracked open just in case he tried anything, but he didn't. I dropped him off, the interstate was literally across the street, and I managed to drive home on my own even though I didn't have a license and had never driven such a long distance on my own before. So now, when people tell you to call a crackhead instead of the cops next time you need help, I have a perfect example of how crackheads were actually more helpful than cops. Story number 11. I sold my virginity to a wealthy businessman. My heart was racing. My knees even trembled a bit. I remember those feelings nearly a decade later. The nervous anticipation I felt as I walked across the hotel lobby and stood waiting for the elevator. I was wearing a little black dress, heels, and new lingerie. Everything about the outfit was out of character for me. I was 19 years old and fit from years spent playing soccer and basketball. Nobody would ever confuse me for a model, but I'm not unattractive. I was a part-time student working my way through college. I had a job working at an upscale hotel. The goal was to work my way up to an assistant manager position to get some of that coveted leadership experience on my resume. The hotel was on a golf course and catered primarily to executive business travelers. It wasn't the kind of place that your company puts you up when you're on the road. It's where the CEO of your company stays. We didn't have a uniform, but were required to dress professionally. That was typically a blouse and skirt for me. The clientele often liked to get flirty with the help. It was our job to go the extra mile. We flirted back. We smiled. We laughed at every unoriginal bad joke. Not just the women. The guys would kiss ass, too. That kind of thing could lead to unwanted advances. Men often wanted to buy me a drink. The more confident ones would suggest more, like having a drink in their room. But I always declined. At least until the day I didn't. He was a regular client. He had a European accent. I don't know what he did, but he was at the hotel every other month. He always booked a suite. The starting price, back then, was $1,200 a night. That night he got in around 10 p.m. He was obviously stressed and complained about his day of travel. I was alone at the front desk. He mentioned he would use some company to help him relax. I politely declined. Then he offered me $500. The money was tempting. I was on a partial scholarship for sports and athletics, but it wasn't enough. I was struggling to pay my bills and tuition. But $500 wasn't going to make me sleep with a stranger. I told him there were clubs nearby where that offer would work. I'm not looking for professionals, he said. I don't like dirty women. I declined again. He opened his wallet and started counting out bills. He had over $600 and a handful of euros. He offered it all. I turned him down a third time. He persisted. I can't sell my virginity for $600, I finally blurted out. I was sure he'd stop after that and be a little more respectful. But the opposite happened. He offered me $2,500. Then $3,000. Then $5,000 for a full night. I was overwhelmed. I told him I needed to think about it. But I also just wanted him to go away. I was on the desk again the next night. When he came by, I accepted his offer. He must have expected it. He slipped me an envelope with the original $600 in bills and told me to dress well and buy new lingerie. I kept most of the money. I bought a dress on sale at Nordstrom Rack and lingerie at a boutique store. He got a room downtown in a different hotel. I'd told him it was against the rules to socialize with guests at work. Every nerve tingled as I walked in. I'd never felt like I might be sick. He sat by the window after he let me in. Undress, he commanded. There were no niceties or icebreakers. I knelt to take off my heels. Not like that, he said. Stand. Take your time. I'd been a tomboy most of my life. I felt awkward. I didn't want to blow it. I took off the dress. He admired the lingerie and told me to spin around for him. I did what he said. There is nothing like deflowering a woman, he told me. It's special. To be a woman's first. The one she will never forget. He kept talking for what seemed like an eternity. I don't know if he wanted to savor the moment or he was just full of himself and thought he was impressing me. I just wanted to get it over with. The actual act wasn't very sensual. He was slow and methodical. He knew what he was doing, though. He wasn't bad or selfish or hurried. He kept telling me how I would remember that night for the rest of my life. Obviously, he wasn't wrong. At least not so far. He slept soundly after. I tossed and turned most of the night. In the morning he ordered room service, but I didn't have an appetite. Dining with him wasn't part of the agreement. The money didn't last long, of course. At that age it seemed like a lot, but I had so many expenses with school. In retrospect, $5,600 doesn't seem like enough money to sell your virginity to a man who obviously got off on corrupting people with his wealth. But I wasn't really a virgin anyway. I'd only said it because I thought he'd leave me alone. Who knew it would only lead to him upping the offer? Story number 12, coworker has an absolutely shocking secret. I worked as a waiter in Boston for a few years, and nothing gave me more joy than getting to work with my favorite busboy, Juan Carlos. Every shift we worked together was full of laughter and non-stop tomfoolery. The manager knew we had a special bond, so she usually scheduled us in the same section, but occasionally I got stuck working with another busser named Fanny instead. Fanny was the absolute worst. She never bussed a table unless I told her to, and then she did so begrudgingly. The rest of the time she would just lean in the corner, staring at her phone, while her lower lip hung lazily. For some reason, the restaurant never had any soup spoons. One time, Jim, the owner, told Fanny to get off her phone and go find some soup spoons in the dish room. She disappeared for like 2 hours, and came back without any soup spoons. "She don't like Mr. Jim," said Juan Carlos, wide-eyed. "She say, not nice things about Mr. Jim." I had known Juan Carlos long enough to know that this was his way of talking mad smack about Fanny. A couple of weeks later, the restaurant hosted its employee Christmas party at Dave & Buster's. They bought everyone food and drinks, and gave everyone a $20 game card. It took Juan Carlos and me about 4 seconds to waste all our money on the punching bag machine, and then we started wandering around the place with our Coronas, trolling our fellow employees. Juan Carlos elbowed me in the rib and pointed across the room. Fanny was overplaying the Kung Fu Panda punching game. Naturally, we made a beeline over there. The game has 6 little punching bags, and you have to punch whichever one lights up. Fanny started punching. And then she kept punching. And then she kept effing punching. It was an overwhelming sight, like watching somebody do what they were born to do. Vague, blurry flashes of fists and forearms. Fanny, alive and deadly. Pandas dropping like flies. The machine lit up with 1,000 bells and whistles, and then it started vomiting tickets all over the ground. Juan Carlos and I stared at each other, shocked. Fanny let me try a turn, and she whispered some cryptic advice in my ear: "You gotta get low." I punched the fastest I could, but I was out pretty quickly. Fanny resumed her position in front of the machine, and she won 4 more grand jackpots in a row. I watched her eyes while she played. They were manic and quivering, the kind of eyes that might gaze upon eternity and never blink. Juan Carlos and I kept reenacting Fanny and the Kung Fu Panda game for a few weeks after that. Juan Carlos couldn't pronounce Kung Fu Panda, and he said Cookie Fu Fonda instead, but I knew what he meant. Not long after, Fanny took a week off to go on a cross-country motorcycle trip with her boyfriend. On the day she was supposed to come back, she didn't show up for her shift. One of the other bussers showed me and the manager a Snapchat story that Fanny had posted like an hour earlier. She was on the back of a motorcycle, arms splayed while she laughed freely. A sign saying, "Welcome to Oregon," flashed by. "I guess that means she's not coming back," said my manager. A few days later, someone went to clean out Fanny's locker, and they found like 200 soup spoons in there. Story 13, Only When I Need You, Only Platonic, Only Friends, a tale as old as time. This morning my friend and I were catching up. We hadn't talked in a long time and it was nice to see what he was up to. During this casual conversation he tells me about his dating life. This is his story. He met a girl back in early 2022 at an event they both attended. She was smart, funny, and cool. They got along well, they had similar careers, hobbies, and they kind of bonded over that. She was more or less a little of a tease. She would often grab his leg when they were sitting at a table or would sometimes tease with things like, "If we were dating, I would let you cook all the time. He's an amazing cook, and he will make you some amazing 5-star dishes, most especially if he cares for you." He always took her words as some sort of sign, but they had just met a few months back, so he didn't attempt anything. As time went on she began to ask for more things of him. Her tire got flat and she was stranded on the highway. She called him up and he came to rescue her. She moved from her apartment to a house. She called him up and he came to help her. She had a bad day and needed to vent to someone. She called him up and he was there to listen. Her AC unit wasn't working. She called him up and he came to fix the problem. There were many other things he did for her in the course of a year and a half. Around month 7 he asked her if she would like to date. They knew each other, they spent a lot of time together and they seemed to like each other a lot. Granted, they never had sex though. But she did kiss him twice. Her answer was no. She said she wasn't ready for a relationship and she didn't have the energy for anyone but maybe in the near future. Well, the near future arrived. It has been like 4 months I think, since that talk. She continued asking him to do things for her and he did because he cared for her. I think he was in love with her, though he didn't say that to me but it sounded like maybe he had fallen for her. One day, she uploads a story on her social media of her and some dude. She's all over this dude, holding him and kissing his neck lol. A few days go by and she uploads another story with that guy and then another. They text during this time about random things but she never mentions anything. 2 weeks later, she's calling my friend up again to ask him if he could pick her up from downtown and drive her home because she drank too much and doesn't want to pay an Uber. My friend says yes and he goes. When he pulls in, she's making out with that dude. Then she gets in the car and the guy waves her goodbye lol. He asks her if that's her boyfriend and she says, almost, I'm trying to convince him. LMAO. He drives her home and drops her off. She asks him to come but he doesn't. This is where he says that everything clicked. She had been just using him until she got someone she wanted lol. He was pretty chewed up about the whole thing. She tried to talk to him for some days but he didn't answer. She texted and he didn't answer. Eventually he texted her back and told her he had been busy. She got mad at him because, I needed a friend and you couldn't even call me back. He then comes to find out that the guy she has been seeing was married and his wife found out. Dude buddy left her to reconcile with his wife. My friend began cutting contact with her slowly because I guess something clicked for him and he was done. She continued asking for a few favors here and there but he stopped catering to her. He said he couldn't just be friends with her at this point in their saga because he cared too much for her. Again, I think he was in love, and it would cause more hurt than anything to continue the friendship knowing she wasn't interested and was only using him. She noticed the drawback of attention he was giving her and she started texting and calling him more. She was inviting him to concerts, she never invited him to the couple concerts she went before, to come watch a movie with her, to dinner, she even offered him to come have dinner at her parents' on Labor Day. By this point he's already moving on and he wasn't little to do with her. He declines all her invites. In October he started dating someone and the other woman found out. He had been cutting the communication with her to almost nothing so when she found out about his GF, she was pissed. She blew up his phone with texts and calls. She acted like she was confused about his girlfriend and then she acted offended that he didn't tell her he was seeing others. She even dared to tell him that she thought they were gonna start dating. LOL. She was unhinged. He was so fed up with her and her BS that he blocked her in everything. It's been 2 months since he blocked her and her friends in everything. His girlfriend is apparently really awesome and she knows how to change a tire on her own. Story number 14. Am I the a-hole for blocking my biological dad and his side of the family? So I, 14M, got into a heated argument with my biological dad, 40M, last night. For context, he, alongside my grandma, used to treat my mom, 37F, like garbage. When she was 6 months pregnant with me, he got arrested for credit card cloning. My mom had to go through hell with my grandma, who used to literally curse her, having only my aunt, 38F, to help her. After my dad got out of jail, he didn't bother to spend time with me. He and my mom broke up after he got out, so I stayed with my mom in another city. In the meantime, he barely tried to make contact with me or bond. So, when my mom had to leave for work in another country, I was left with him. He used to bring home a new girl weekly, and sometimes even leave me at their place. He also used to spend nights at the bar, leaving me, a 4-year-old, alone. I used to call and text my mom, crying and shaking from fear. Whenever I wanted to spend time with him, he magically had to work in the garage at nothing, or he would spend 5 minutes with me and then say he got tired and go inside, leaving me alone outside. It went on like that for years, where he would ignore me or just stay 5 minutes with me and complain about a pain and go. Fast forward to a few summers ago, he moved to another country, and when I went to visit him, he didn't spend any time with me. I spent time with my aunt, cousin, and uncle there. And let's not forget his wife. He remarried and had a kid, my 3-year-old stepbrother, who that woman would just leave me to deal with, because I was his older brother and needed to spend time with him. Luckily, they lived in the same flat as my aunt, so she dealt with the kid and I had who to stay with. Fast forward to last summer, they came back in the country and I went to visit them. The second I arrived, I was neglected. He didn't try to make any conversation with me, spend time with me. Nothing, and before you ask, maybe he was busy. He took law courses in the morning and slept the afternoon. But at dawn, when he would wake up and be fine, nope. And then we headed to some place up in the mountains, a place I don't even like. It was boring as heck, and again, they ignored me. I just stood outside or on my phone. And then, he and his wife just went for a 30 minutes walk, leaving me with the kid. They didn't even ask if I could stay with him. No, they just left. And that was my breaking point. I called my mother the next day and told her everything, and my stepdad, who I consider my real dad, came to pick me up. P.S. We live 4 hours away from that city, and the road isn't very nice. Fast forward to yesterday, I spoke with my aunt and decided to stay a few days at her, in the city where my dad used to live because they came back in the country. When my biological dad called me last night to wish me an empty happy Christmas, I told him I was vicing my aunt. And he said, "Yeah, and you stayed 2 days with us and left." I told him I had my reasons for leaving, and he said, "Yeah, to go to Greece." Yes, we went to Greece, but it wasn't planned, so him saying that made no sense. Then, I lost it. Everything I was holding for the past 10 years burst out like word vomit. I told him how he never stood with me, how he always neglected me, and what a horrible person he was. I kept going on about how he was never a dad to me, how he used to leave me home alone to go drinking, and how he couldn't buy me with money. He used to send about €100 almost monthly, but that doesn't mean him his loving son. I told him that I never lived in that tiny excuse of a city, and he said, "When will you understand you live there?" I went there for about a month in the summers. If I count all the time I spent there, it's about a year. After that, he again wished me a Merry Christmas, but before he could finish I hanged up and blocked him, my grandma and his wife. I told my mom and she agrees with me, but said I shouldn't have blocked them because it makes me just like them. What should I do now? Story number 15, my prosthetic leg saved me from an STD. This happened many years ago, from when I, 52M, was in high school. I, 16M, had already been living with a below-knee amputation from when I was 13. I was not the most popular guy in my high school, but it was well known through my various antics that I was an amputee. My friend, Mike, 17M, and I both had a crush on the same girl, Maddie, 16F. Being inexperienced, it took me a while to gain enough courage to ask Maddie out. So I devised a plan to do a double date by asking a mutual friend of hers, Alice, 16F, whom had a crush on Mike and knew of my crush with Maddie. It was foolproof. Mike had the car, and I was bringing someone to keep him occupied so I can try my charms on Maddie. Alice had told Maddie of my crush, but did not let her know that Mike was also crushing on her. Mike and I arrived to Alice's house to pick her and Maddie up, and all of us went out to the mall with the plan to eat at a popular restaurant afterwards. The mall date was not bad, but it did reveal the one kink both Alice and I had in our plan. Mike thought it was a date with him and Maddie, which made Alice feel like the third wheel, as Mike and I had our attention on Maddie. I felt the tension this brought on and tried to make Alice feel more included. At one point it was just me and Alice alone and I asked if she was okay. She told me she was fine as she was used to Maddie always stealing the attention when it came to boys. Maddie, apparently, was not used to anyone not giving her all the attention, so when she saw me and Alice talking, decided to ignore Mike and pay attention to me. I was elated, my plan was finally working. By the time we went to the restaurant, Maddie and I were really hitting it off and openly flirting. When the date was over, Maddie asked to sit up front, leaving me and Alice in the back seat. I thought that was odd, but I was really surprised when Maddie asked for Mike to drive her home, leaving me at Alice's house. Maddie had completely ghosted me and started dating Mike. It perplexed me, so one day at school I confronted her. I asked what happened as I thought we were hitting it off so well. She agreed with me, but added that during our dinner she kept rubbing my leg and I ignored her advances. I asked her if she knew I had a prosthetic leg, to which she told me that of course, everybody knows that I have a prosthetic leg. That's when it dawned on her and she realized that she was rubbing the wrong leg. Maddie then asked if I was doing anything after school that day, to which I did blow her off, as I knew Mike was really into her. A couple weeks later, Mike had informed me that he lost his virginity to her but also caught an STD, so by sheer luck, my prosthetic leg saved me from an STD. Clarification: we sat across from each other, Alice and Maddie in a booth, Mike and myself in chairs. When I say rubbing, it was with her feet/foot, and to my knowledge, not bare feet. Story number 16, what if he runs after me? When I was a little younger, I took my skateboard and my cap and went for a walk. I was trying to find a good place to skate a little, but I couldn't find. It was another city, my family has a house there, where we usually spend our vacations. As I was walking through those streets, I couldn't help noticing I was getting lost. Realizing that, I tried to make my way home, but then I got lost for real. My phone had no signal due to the location change, I guess. So I tried to stay calm and remember where I came from, but the more I tried to remember, the more nervous I got. I decided to keep walking, and maybe I would find a way to return home. It was getting darker, and I had no idea where I was. I walked past some weird houses, and those streets had scary vibes. That city was known to be a place with pretty houses and good vibes, but I guess that, in that day, I had found the weird corner of the city. Those houses looked abandoned. I didn't see a single person there, and the houses were in bad condition. Well, I was getting scared. The bad vibes, the creepy streets, the time running out, the sky getting darker. As if it wasn't enough, I heard a noise. It sounded like when you step on dry leaves. It couldn't be me, I hadn't stepped on anything. I felt the blood pumping and could only think of the worst. I looked behind myself and saw a guy with a blue hoodie and some dark pants walking in my direction. I had that feeling you get when you're getting pale. I'll never forget it. I took another discreet look around, and there was really nobody else. I was alone, with that guy following me. He was an average-sized man, I was smaller than him and also weaker, besides being about 13 to 14 years old. I didn't stand a chance in case he tried to do anything to me. The time was running out, and I couldn't run with it. I thought, what if he runs after me? It would be a dumb idea, I guess. I wasn't really fast and was wearing baggy jeans, besides carrying a skateboard and not knowing where to run. I almost wanted to cry, but I was too nervous for that. When I looked behind myself again, he was still there, but when he noticed I was looking at him, he came around the corner. I didn't know what his intentions were, but I didn't think the best of it. What if he's trying to get a shortcut? I thought. I checked my phone to see if I still had no signal, and lucky for me, I had. So I called my grandpa and shared my location with him, since now I could. I asked him to pick me up as fast as he could because it was already night, and with a little bit of hesitation, I also told him about the guy. He came as fast as he could and picked me up. I got home safe and told my family what happened. They were worried, but everything turned out well. I remember that day as if it were still happening. Story number 17, stuck in crosshairs of a green card, ex-wife and an AirTag stalking. I wish I could make this up, I wish this just didn't happen. This happened years ago and I'm still messed up about it. After I, 25F, but 23 during this story, found out my friend, Chris, 31M, was actually still in a green card marriage with a psycho, I checked the details with his friends. He wasn't entirely giving me a straight answer, and I know they would. There were potential issues with DACA and immigration with Trump in office, and Chris was introduced to Caroline during this time. After 6 months of spending time together, her family encouraged them to get married so she wouldn't have to worry about deportation, as she was the only kid out of 4 that wasn't born in the U.S. A week after this suggestion they got married, no rings, no ceremony, just the courthouse. They still lived together at this point, 2 years later, but I was assured by everyone that they only did it for paperwork purposes, to prevent the question of their marriage's validity during her citizenship process. His friends didn't validate any of his decisions here, just told me this is the facts of what happened. I was worried this was a threatening situation. I'm not trying to be involved as the other woman in a marriage conflict, but they told me she was harmless. However, this was after the fact that her teenage sister stalked his social media accounts to find me and determine my full name, to message me. I only followed him on TikTok. I was assured after she used this info to find me on Instagram and message me, she wouldn't do anything else. She hates her lawful husband and is excited for when they can officially separate on paper. I was assured she was just trying to stir the pot since he started going out again since COVID/ their separation. After finding this out, I felt better. We all went about spending the day bar hopping, as that's what you do in WI. I had no other friends, I had only recently moved there, so I took what they said at face value. We ended the day with Chinese food at my apartment. I got a notification that an AirTag was following us all day, showed everywhere we drove to, including our final destination, my apartment. He didn't get the notification as he didn't have an iPhone, and it takes 8-ish hours, at this time, in 2021, for the notification of a nearby AirTag to come through on your phone. So we went outside and found it in a small side compartment of his trunk. We disabled it and he assured me he would talk to her when she got back from being out of town, as she went away for the weekend. He stayed over at my apartment. I stayed on the couch as I was still a little uncomfy and wasn't sleeping well with all of this going on. He left in the morning. I suggested to him to go down the stairs as the elevator was really slow anyways. 2 minutes later I get a knock at that door. It was Caroline, with her 13-year-old sister, who was holding her phone up videotaping me. The Midwest is the land of opening doors for people, even in my secure apartment building, and there was a directory with my initial and last name attached to my unit number, for delivery purposes. She had an engagement ring on when she showed up, which I found out later was from a previously failed relationship, and was asking me where Chris was. I told her I don't know, he wasn't in my apartment, and to check at their place, as I'm not getting involved. I let her come in and check my apartment to prove I wasn't lying or hiding him, then told her to go home and talk to her lawfully wedded husband, and to take her AirTag with her. She said it's not hers, it's her brother's, and he was the one following us around all day tracking Chris's car. They finally left after 10 minutes, which felt like 4 hours. After several reoccurring panic attacks, I messaged Chris, saying I'm done with this, I can't trust to be safe around him, even when I'm told by multiple people that I have nothing to worry about, because they're wrong. The next few days I had extreme agoraphobia. I couldn't get groceries, or honestly even drive without having a breakdown. I stayed in my apartment, only leaving to get DoorDash from the lobby when I was officially starving. In this city where I knew no one, where I had tried to make friends, I was deathly afraid of being followed. Warnings for AirTags used as tools for stalking and human trafficking purposes were showing up in the news at this point. I started looking for other jobs immediately, both within and outside my company, trying to relocate somewhere I actually knew people, where I had a say in where I was going to live. I was only in this job for a year and a half at this point. The whole reason I was there in the first place was because I was placed there by my company. My preferences didn't matter, as no one's does for this job. So I had to get out, and I did, but I still struggle with many psychological issues since this.